Welcome to Once Upon a Time Originals, where you can be enchanted by familiar and unfamiliar fairy tales in their original form. Today you will hear Puss in Boots, a fairy tale by the brothers Grimm. A miller had 3 sons. His mill, a donkey and a tomcat. The sons had to grind. The donkey had to get grain and carry flour away, and the cat had to catch the mice away. When the miller died, the 3 brothers divided their inheritance. The oldest received the mill, the second the donkey, and the third the tomcat. Further was nothing left for him. Thereon he was sad and spoke to himself. "But I have gotten all the worst. My oldest brother can mill, my second can ride on his donkey. What can I start with the tomcat? Let me make a pair of fur gloves out of his pelt, so it's over." "Listen," said the tomcat, who had understood everything what he said. "You do not need to kill me to get a pair of bad gloves from my pelt. Let only a pair of boots be made for me, that I can go out and be seen among the people, then you will soon be helped." The miller's son was in wonderment that the tomcat so spoke, but because the shoemaker just walked by, he called him in and let a pair of boots be measured for him. When they were ready, the tomcat put them on, took a sack, made the bottom of the same full of corn, but on the top a string with which one could pull it closed. Then he threw it over his back and went on 2 legs, like a human, out the door. In those days reigned a king in the land. He liked to eat partridges so much. There was a need that none were to be gotten. The whole forest was full, but they were so shy that no hunter could reach them. The tomcat knew that and considered to do his matter better. When he came into the forest, he made the sack open, spread the corn apart, but the cord he laid into the grass and led it behind a hedge. There he hid himself, snuck around and lurked. The partridges soon came running, and one after the other hopped into the sack. When a good quantity was in it, the tomcat pulled the cord closed, ran to and twisted their heads around. Then he threw the sack over his shoulder and went straight away to the king's palace. The watch cried, "Halt!" "Where to?" "To the king," answered the tomcat quickly. "Are you crazed? A tomcat to the king?" "Just let him go," said another. "The king has often boredom. Maybe the tomcat makes him amused with his humming and spinning." When the tomcat came in front of the king, he made a reverence and said, "My lord, the count," with that he named his long and distinguished name, "lets himself be recommended to this king and sends him these partridges that he just caught in slings." The king, astonished over the beautiful fat partridges, knew not out of pleasure how to contain himself, and commanded that the tomcat be given as much gold out of the treasure chamber into his sack as he could carry. "That bring to your lord, and thank him again many times for his gift." But the poor miller's son sat at home at the window, supported his head and his hand, and thought that he had spent his last for the tomcat's boots, and what large things will he be able to bring back? Thereon the tomcat stepped in, threw the sack from his hack, untied it open and shook the gold in front of the miller. "There you have something for the hoots. The king also greets you and says many thanks to you." The miller was glad over the wealth, without understanding rightly how it came to be. But the tomcat, as he took off his boots, told him everything. Then he said, "You do have money enough now, but it should not stay with that. Tomorrow I will put my boots on again. You will become richer still. I also told the king that you are a lord." On the next day the torn cat went, as he had said, well booted, to hunting again, and brought the king a rich catch. So it went all days, and the tomcat brought gold home all days, and was so popular as one by the king that he was allowed to come in and go out and prowl around in the palace where he wanted. One time the tomcat stood in the king's kitchen by the stove and warmed himself. Thereon came the coachman and cursed, "I wish king and the princess were at the executioner. I wanted to go to Wirt's house and drink once and play cards. There I should drive them spazieren at the lake." As the tomcat heard that, he snuck home and told his master, "If a count you want to be and become rich, so come outside with me to the lake and bathe yourself therein." The miller did not know what he should say to that, but followed the tomcat, went with him, undressed splinter naked, and sprang into the water. But the tomcat took his clothes, carried them away, and hid them. No sooner was he finished with that, thereon came the king driving by. The tomcat immediately began pathetically to lament, "Ah, all-merciful king, my lord, bathed himself here in the lake. Thereon a thief came and stole his clothes. That lay on the shore. Now the Lord Count is in the water and cannot come out, and if he stays in longer, he will couch cold and die." When the king heard that, he called halt, and one of his people had to chase back and of the king's clothes bring hack. The Lord Count put on the magnificent clothes, and because the king, anyway, for the partridges, that he thought to have received from him, held his worth, so he had to sit with them in the carriage. The princess was also not upset over it, because the count was young and handsome, and she liked him quite well. But the tomcat went ahead and came to a large grass field, where over 100 people were making hay. "Who does this grass field belong to, you people?" said the tomcat. "The great magician. Listen. The king will soon drive by when he asks who the grass field belongs to, so answer, 'The Count,' and if you do not do that, you will all be struck dead." Thereon the tomcat went further and came to a grain field, so large that no one could oversee it. There stood more than 200 people and cut the grain. "Whose grain is this, you people?" The magician. "Listen, the king will drive by now, when he asks who the grain belongs to, so answer, 'The Count,' and if you do not do that, thou will all be struck dead." Finally the tomcat came to a magnificent forest. There stood more than 300 people, felled the big oaks and made wood. "Whose forest is this, you people?" The magician. "Listen, the king will drive by now when he asks who the forest belongs to, so answer, 'The Count,' and if you do not do that, you will all be killed." The tomcat went still further. The people all looked after him, and because he looked so wonderly, and as a human walked in the boots, they were afraid of him. He soon came to the magician's palace, stepped boldly in and in front of him. The magician looked at him contemptuously and asked him what he wanted. The tomcat made a reverence and said, "I have beard that vous could transform yourself into every animal you chose by your own will. What a hound, fox, or even wolf concerns, that I will well believe, but of an elephant, that seems to me quite impossible, and therefore I have come to convince myself." The magician said proudly, "That is a trifle to me," and in that wink of an eye was transformed into an elephant. "That is much, but also in a lion." "That is also nothing," said the magician, and stood as a lion in front of the tomcat. The tomcat made as if startled and cried, "That is unbelievable and unheard of, the same I would never had dreamt of coming into my thoughts. But more still all else it would be, if you could transform yourself into such a small animal as a mouse is, you can certainly do more than any other magician in the world. But that will be certainly too high for you." The magician was very friendly from the sweet words and said, "Oja, dear catlet, that I can also," and sprang as a mouse around the room. The tomcat was after him, caught the mouse with one jump and ate him up. But the king was still driving Spazieren with the count and the princess, and came to the large field. "Who does the hay belong to?" asked the king. "The count's," cried all, as the tomcat had commanded them. "Thou have a pretty piece of land, Lord Count," said he. Thereafter they came to the large grain field. "Who does the grain belong to, you people?" "The Lord Count." Lord Count large, big estates." "Thereon to the forest." "Who does the wood belong to, you people?" "The Lord Count." The king was astonished even more and said, "Thou must be a rich man, Lord Count. I do not believe that I have such a magnificent forest." Finally they came to the palace. The tomcat stood on top of the stairs, and as the wagon stopped below, he sprang down, opened the door, and said, "His king, thou comest to the palace of my lord the count, that this honours him and makes him hap of his life day long." The king stepped out and marvelled at the magnificent building that was almost larger and more beautiful than his own palace. But the count led the princess up the stairs into the hall that was shimmering with gold and precious stones. Thereon the princess was promised to the count, and when the king died he was king, but the booted tomcat became first minister. If you liked the story in its original version, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and leave a like. Thank you, and see you next time on Once Upon a Time Originals.